The first bill on the agenda today is House File 3761. It's a Representative Finke bill, and I will move to lay over House File 3761. Welcome to the committee, Representative Finke, and your bill is before us, so please go ahead and tell us about it.
Thank you so much, Chair Moeller and committee members. For the record, my name is Lee Finke. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm here with House File 3761, the Safety Through Support Act. Members, there is clear established data showing that a successful reentry of our incarcerated neighbors is directly correlated to people coming to visit them while they're living in our prisons. It's not hard to imagine why this is true. We all need human connection. A study of visitation in Minnesota's prisons showed recidivism rates dropped significantly simply by having visitors. The more visitors, the lower the recidivism rate. The closer familial ties of those visitors, the lower the recidivism rate. Unfortunately, up to 50% of incarcerated people will have zero visitors during their time living in our prisons. Among the reasons that people aren't able to visit is cost, restrictive visiting times, and the distance. It's not easy sometimes to visit your loved ones. We'll hear more about that in our testimony. I believe it is our moral responsibility to ensure that all people have human connection regardless of their situation. But the Safety Through Support Act is also good economic policy and good public safety policy. Lowering our recidivism rate will save the state money and it will keep our communities safer. So the Safety Through Support Act seeks to expand visitation to our incarcerated population. It adds mentoring as a cause for visitation, expands the definitions of who is able to visit to include mental health and medical professionals, and it would create a task force to support the rehabilitation and reentry of incarcerated persons, more specifically creating a system to ensure that everyone receives the benefits of visitation while they are incarcerated. That's the high-level walk through the bill. We can have more discussion later, but I will turn it over to my testifiers.
All right, thank you. The first person on the list is Holly Kathleen Bott, and then Zeke Caligiuri is up next. So if you wanted to come forward and be close to the testifiers table when we call on you. Welcome to the committee. Hi. Please introduce yourself when you're situated, and you can begin your testimony. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Holly Bott, and I am here to share my story and strongly advocate for the passage of this Safety Through Support Act. It is a critical measure to enhance safety in our society. 5 years ago, I was released from MCF Shakopee after having served a 12-year sentence. Let me tell you, that walk away wasn't just about leaving prison. It was about coming back to life. And it was my visits with family and friends that kept me going through those years. You see, my loved ones didn't just visit me. They made it a priority. They drove long miles, thousands of miles, sacrificed vacations, and committed to showing up regularly for my entire time there. Their commitment wasn't just about seeing me, it was about keeping me grounded, focused, and ready for the day I could step out again and rebuild my life. I finished my time as a model inmate, and today I am a successful business owner. The evidence is clear. Community connection is pivotal for reentry success, but here's the thing. Not everyone has that kind of support, and that's where this bill comes in. It's not just about visits. It's about building connections that make a real difference. Take my husband, for example. I met him after my release in 2019 when I committed to visiting those that I had left behind and never saw have a visit. That was 5 years ago, and next month will be our first wedding anniversary. When we connected in 2019, his life in prison took a very positive turn. His first decade in prison was marked by serious discipline issues, violence, and addiction, no programming at all. his choice. Since our meeting and regular visits, he's successfully completed many programs, earned a college degree, and remains free, discipline-free, and has been for years. Yet the system has its limits. If I choose to be a volunteer inside prison, I can't be on any inmate's visiting list. And if I opt to visit inmates instead, I'm restricted to visiting just 2 different people. This constraint severely limits the impact I can make and the connections I can continue to foster. This bill is a chance to change that, remove unnecessary barriers, and enable meaningful interactions that can truly make a difference. I want to just add one thing. Talking about mental health, I entered prison with clinical depression. I even spent time on suicide watch. My access to counseling and mental health care in prison was extremely limited despite my previously diagnosed illness, and my husband has encountered even more limited access, even denial of mental health care. Access to this support is crucial, and it saves lives. This bill sets up a task force to ensure everyone gets the help they need, breaking down barriers and giving people a real shot at good mental health. So I urge you to pass this bill. It's not just about me or my husband. It's about everyone out there who deserves a second chance and a path to a better future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony, and congratulations on your successes, and to your husband as well. And thank you for advocating for others. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Zeke Caligiuri. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Mahler, members of the committee. My name is Zeke Caligiuri. I'm from the Reenfranchise Coalition, working to empower newly reenfranchised voters, and as well as those still incarcerated in our state system. I come to you here as somebody who has experienced what a cell feels like. Right? I was so fortunate to have a family and friends who showed up and supported me throughout my time. Part of what made this possible was because they were able to visit consistently during designated visiting times. Consistency made all that possible. I was also fortunate enough to be embraced by my community during a period of time of my incarceration that offered me opportunities to learn skills that I would be able to bring out with me after my incarceration. I come because if we want human beings to act and think as human beings within these spaces, we have to respect and facilitate that person's humanity and to the humanity of the people who love them and are willing to take their often over-leveraged time to spend it with their incarcerated loved ones. I went through the pandemic inside of a cell and watched how something as vital to reentry success as visiting just disappeared due to the measures needed during that time, only to return sporadically and to take a back seat to other things like staffing in those facilities. We have all the numbers that will tell you all the things about the validity of visiting and people's need to stay connected outside. At some point in our state's history, we decided that the family system and that the supporters and friends of incarcerated people were somehow criminal and not do the same sort of respect and humanity that they should have. Little has been done in the last 30 years to address physical and psychological conditions within our state's facilities. There's drastic need to address the use of discipline and punishment within those facilities, as well as the deteriorating infrastructures that make living in those places more challenging. Visiting is the clearest, most direct way to improve the DOC's interactions with the loved ones of incarcerated people. It's where they're able to show decency and respect for the time that these free world visitors the time of these free world visitors, instead of reinforcing the humiliating and degrading disregard for humanity of those being visited and those visiting. There's a very matriarchal core to the people who are coming to visit these places. I remember my mother, who came and visited me twice a week for 20 years, speaking to me about coming in and the metal detectors being set so high that the women would have to go to the bathroom, cut out the wire from their bras just so that they could come in and visit their loved ones. I had my own 90-year-old grandmother turned away because they told her sundress on a 95-degree day was too provocative. truth be told, these people didn't commit a crime or anything to deserve the sort of treatment that it took just to walk them through these doors, right? This tells me that it's important to recognize the value of the family and the community to restore the people who live in these places, right? We've heard often the idea of restored people restoring communities. Well, the truth be told is, if you create a safer, more comfortable environment for those who live in those places, they will treat the staff better in those places. They will treat the people in their lives better. We are building stronger, healthier human beings. And I believe that this particular bill helps to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony, and also congratulations to you on your successes, and appreciate your advocacy as well. Do we have
Thank you,
any
Chairman.
members of the public who wish to testify? All right, hi, come on forward. Welcome back to the committee, and if you want to just introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. Members, my name is Elliot Boutai. I'm the Senior Policy Coordinator at NAMI, Minnesota, and I just want to speak in support of, 100% support of everything everyone's already said, and also just to give the perspective, we get lots of calls, now more calls, that they're free to NAMI. We've gotten letters for years of people needing mental health support in prisons. And you know, mental health, mental illnesses are different sometimes than physical illnesses, in that there's not necessarily like 5 therapy sessions you can go to and your mental health is better. And I just want to really emphasize how important these visits are for people. And as somebody who lives with PTSD and a mental illness, you're not sure when that point of connection is going to kind of move you forward in your journey. And sometimes you have 3 connections with a family member that you're trying to work something out with, and they don't feel great, and the 4th one is when you make a breakthrough. And so as we literally don't have the money, don't have the mental health professionals to work in our prisons, I would like to frame this as a kind of medicine, that people need this to keep moving forward. And everything that's been said is true. They come out better. Our communities are better while they're inside. So really important and fully supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Anybody else from the public wishing to testify? All right, I'm not seeing anybody else, so we can move on to member discussion. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Finke. I have no interest in arguing for the status quo. Surely there are opportunities for us to provide greater access, especially to what the last testifier spoke to, mental health services, and access to mentors, people who are going to help with the process of rehabilitation. My concern with the way that this bill is drafted falls into 2 categories. One is what I see as a pretty obvious exposure to discrimination, which I'll unpack here in a moment, and the other is a security concern. Maybe I'll just start there because that's the one that's easiest to articulate. So in lines 231 and 232, we're going to say that the commissioner may not use strip searches for incarcerated persons before or following a meeting with a visitor unless there is a credible documented security concern. And I'm not sure, and perhaps you can provide an example of what that would look like in terms of a credible documented security concern. It occurs to me that the credible documented security concern is that they're a convicted criminal who has been incarcerated, and what that means is that certain civil rights have been curtailed. That's what incarceration is. And that status unto itself presents a credible documented security concern, and there's a need to control contraband moving in to and circulating around our correctional facilities. And I guess I'll start there with, could you unpack what the thought process is there, and do you share any security concerns with that language?
Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair Moeller, Representative Hudson. We have many experts in the room who can talk to the drafting of why the language is what the language is. But I would say specifically, I do not share the idea that a conviction means that you are forever a security concern. I do believe that the notion that your conviction is always a predetermined factor of your being a security risk, I simply reject that. That's not a humane way to understand the people who are in our prisons. But if somebody wants to come up and talk about the specific language and why we decided to change the strip search language, I would welcome that.
Right, looks like Ms. Bott is returning to the table, so thank you for being available to answer that question. Go ahead.
So during my incarceration, there were no body scanners in the prison, which there are today for visits. And many of the women I was incarcerated with were victims of previous abuse and rape, sexual assault, and so they didn't want visits. I remember one specific incident, they were training new guards, and I had had so many visits that by this time, the strip search and everything that you do behind the ears, open your mouth, wave your hands, I knew it by heart. And a guard came in and said, "Don't do any of that. We're training a new guard. She's going to come in. She's going to tell you what to do. Wait for her instructions." And this guard came in, and the guard looked traumatized. And she could not remember anything to tell me. So I stood there frozen and naked, waiting to be told what to do while two guards stared at me. One of them just slack jaw with, "This is so traumatizing for her. She can't give me instructions." And finally, and I was nervous because to disobey a direct order means seg, or discipline, or my visits restricted. But finally, I couldn't take the tension anymore, and I just proceeded without her telling me anything, and they both looked at the, ashamed, and it was just awful. I have had thousands of strip searches, and now that the body scanners are available, women who didn't want visits before are now asking their families to come in. And they just, they get a pat search, they're quickly scanned, and they're on their way, and the strip search doesn't happen. So I can speak to the psychological trauma of those things.
Great, thank you. And I just want to make sure that we keep things moving, and just so people in the public know and the committee knows, I intend to we're laying this bill over today. I intend in the interim to have a very long discussion about all things DOC related. I would love to have like a half-day session for us to really delve into a lot of these issues. They're very important. And so I know we're going to feel rushed today a little bit, but I just want to let committee members know that that's something that I would really like to do as a committee to discuss later. Any follow-up, Representative Hudson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, and I'll try to make it as concise as possible. So certainly, if the function that a strip search serves can be served in another way that's more dignified, by all means. This language doesn't make it clear that that's the intention. My other concern that I'll raise is just regarding the potential discrimination that this bill could empower. I mean, we're going to create a diversity task force that is going to determine a number of people who get to be in a special class of enabled visitors who have all this additional access to incarcerated people, to inmates, and not to the rest of us. And the reason why that's problematic is currently, right now, there's an ongoing lawsuit involving the Department of Corrections where an official abruptly canceled a Christian rehabilitation program at the correctional facility in St. Cloud. It's described as an instrumental tool that was facilitating successful transitions to the community for male prison inmates over the past decade, which is the express purpose that we seem to be going after. And yet, currently right now, there's reason to believe that there's ongoing discrimination against certain points of view and certain religious perspectives, most certainly. And so the idea that we're going to have these gatekeepers who are going to be determining who gets to have access to incarcerated people and who has to go by the old, more restrictive rules is something that I find deeply concerning. Thank you.
Did you want to address that, Representative Finke?
Thank you, Chair Mueller and Representative Hudson. I would say that the purpose of this task force is to ensure that everyone has visitors who can meaningfully contribute to their lives, and discriminatory practices by the Department of Corrections are certainly not my purview.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair Mueller. Thank you, Representative Finke, for bringing this forward. I think when I look at this language, I think you're right. There's like a couple of places that we could probably tighten it up or make more specific the things that we're doing. But in general, I really support this. And I just wanted to express my support for this because having worked as a lawyer and interacting with a number of people who are incarcerated, the reality is without those ties to the outside community, people lose hope and they lose perspective, and it really inhibits their ability to grow and become better people and functioning members of society. And I think that's our goal in general, is to make sure that folks go through this process, serve time, and then come out as members of a participatory member of our society. And when you lose connection to the outside world, there's no reason to do better. There's no reason to work harder. There's no reason to try to, rectify the things that you have done or, establish a different mindset. And so I really do believe that having those connections, especially positive connections to the outside community, is really, really important. And so I want to thank you for bringing this forward.
Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Moeller. I see we have Commissioner Schnell in the audience. Can I ask him a quick question if possible?
Well, he's going to be talking about his bill in a little bit too. So just in the sake of keeping things moving. You're going to have questions for him as well? Well, why don't we'll allow those when we're talking about, unless it's like very specific about the language. Is it a question about the language or more of a process related?
More of a process, so I can wait.
Let's wait and do that. Is that okay? Representative Novotny will do that for you as well. Okay. Anything then at this point, Representative Whitty? No? No. All right. Chair Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just wanted to thank Representative Finke for bringing this forward. It's always struck me serving on these committees, it's the Department of Corrections. It's not the Department of Punishment. It's the idea is that, and the reality is that most of these people are going to return to our communities, and the better connected they are to their loved ones and their communities and the resources, the better off we're all going to be when they're released, because the reality is we can't just keep everybody locked up indefinitely. I also wanted to note that many incarcerated people are not in for violent crimes. So I just want to make sure we're being careful as we talk about incarcerated folks, that we're not necessarily lumping them all in the same category. And to what Representative Finke said, we don't necessarily know that just because somebody's convicted of something that it means that they're necessarily always going to be a violent or dangerous person in any way. I was just double checking. I know we don't currently charge a fee for visitors, but I think it is important to update our language to reflect that isn't something we should be doing. And finally, I would just say on the task force, maybe it's a task force on support rehabilitation and reentry. Maybe we don't have to call it a diversity task force. It could just be a task force where we are openly making sure we have people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And that includes folks in marginalized communities and others. It includes everybody. And so that would be my suggestion as we move forward. And I think a way to make sure this is workable and fair to everybody involved. But I just really appreciate this because, again, we know recidivism rates go down when people have connections to their community. It's a huge indicator of success. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm glad we're considering it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did you want to respond, Representative Finke?
Thank you, Chair Mueller. I just wanted to thank Chair Becker-Finn, but I did also want to point out that one of the key pieces of diversity that we are trying to resolve in this task force is geographic, right? So I know that word itself, I have no problem with changing the language to make it clear, but one of the biggest problems is geographic diversity and how we move people and bodies from where they are to where their loved ones are incarcerated.
Thank you. Representative Bueller.
Thank you, Chair Mueller, and thank you, Representative Finke. Like Walter Hudson, I have no interest in keeping the status quo, but I'm a data person, and so I just had a couple of questions. The first is, and maybe this is for you, Chair Mueller, of if there was a fiscal note that had been requested, or if we had any type of fiscal note response to this.
I believe one has been requested, and maybe John Wells wants to address it.
Madam Chair, Representative Mueller, fiscal note has been requested, but it has not been signed off by the LBO at this time.
And that's one reason why we're laying it over.
And
Yeah,
then
go
what-
ahead, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, thank you, Chair Mueller. And then the other question, I was really interested, you said that you were looking at a study on visitation and had cited several statistics from there. I was wondering if you could provide that study. I love reading studies so that I can kind of understand some of the context of where some of these bills are written up.
Representative Finke.
Yes, thank you, Chair Mueller. And I agree, Representative Mueller, and the Department of Corrections can send you that link. I can send you that link, but I also asked for follow-up and more recent information, and there's a whole wealth of information that we have that makes it so clear that visitation makes our communities safer and will save us money. So I'm happy to make sure this bill is responding almost directly to everything that 2011 study said we need to do to make sure our communities are safer.
And Representative Finke, I would just say if it's you or the department, whoever's sharing a study, if you could share that with our committee administrators, so we can make sure all of us get a copy of that. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Chair Mueller, and thank you, Representative Finke. And that's actually really interesting that, because that was one of my questions as I was going to read the study, is does it take into the effect of the pandemic? One of your testifiers talked about the devastating effect on IPs from the pandemic and how isolation was crushing, and I couldn't agree more. I was teaching during that time, and I didn't know if there was any study that had included in pandemic, showed visitation rates before and after, and what that included. And maybe that research doesn't exist yet, but I just wanted to be able to kind of see where that was coming from. Thank you, Chair Mueller.
Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair Mueller, and for the question. The data that I looked at may not be as specific as that question, but there is data that shows at least about the use of remote technology to visit. The costs of that can be prohibitive, but the value of that has been studied and shown that it is also very important to lowering recidivism rates.
All right, any further member questions? Not seeing any, so closing remarks, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair Mueller and committee members for the discussion. I think that this bill, obviously we have to do some updates on our language, and I'm happy to work with anybody on doing that. But as our final testifier said, this is medicine. I love that. This is what medicine looks like in our mental health communities. This is what medicine looks like when we're serving our incarcerated neighbors. I say incarcerated neighbors because 95% of the people who are in prison will be out of prison. And it is our duty to do everything we can while they are in our care to make sure they succeed when they are going into reentry. So thank you so much.
Thank you again, Representative Finke, and the testifiers. We appreciate you being here today, especially on this snowy day. So glad you made it in safely. And with that, I renew the motion and lay over House File 3761.